You happy?
I'm rich, I'm alive. I don't see how I can be much better.
You a king among men. I hope you know that.
Suddenly you was here. Instantly I had love, I had purpose.
Get your crazy ass down.
Hey, shit now, sissy, look. I'm just getting started up here.
Jerome Saint was never meant to be a villain.
And if you hadn't let yourself get played by that trick you married, you might have.
You ain't family.
What you mean by that? You know what I mean by that?
Put y'all at risk.
Make the phone call.
You ain't gonna do shit.
But in a world where survival demands sacrifice,
Tell you I'm goddamn done. I'm done selling crack. I'm done getting shot at. I'm done trying to kill my goddamn family.
even the strongest men break.
Acknowledge this shit is fucking insanity. The money ain't worth this shit, Lou. Ain't nothing gonna make it right.
He wasn't power hungry like Fraklin. He wasn't ruthless like Louis. All he ever wanted was love, family, and purpose. But in South Central LA, love doesn't keep you safe, it makes you vulnerable.
Shot with him. Watch him drop. Got him in the head. You tell Fraklin that I did this, and I ain't gonna stop till I get all what's mine.
Teach your man how to squabble.
This is the dark psychology of Jerome Saint.
Jerome.
Jerome's story begins long before the events in Snowfall, rooted in a past that shaped his outlook on life and the choices he would later make. Born in Texas, Jerome was a product of a tough environment, one where opportunities were scarce and life often felt like an uphill battle. His sister, Sissy Saint, eventually sought a way out, moving to the Bay Area in search of a better future. But Jerome, not wanting to be around the hippie lifestyle, chose a different path. Rather than following her to the Bay, he ventured to South Central Los Angeles, unknowingly setting the stage for a life filled with both purpose and pain. Jerome's move to LA was not the fresh start he envisioned. He would later recall the isolation and emptiness he felt upon arriving.
When I got here, I realized a mistake. I ain't no people here, nowhere to fit in. I wasn't gonna run back home.
With no real connections and nowhere to truly fit in, he was left to navigate a world that felt foreign and unwelcoming. He tried to carve out an existence for himself, securing a job at the Chrysler plant to maintain some stability. But despite the steady paycheck, a deep void lingered inside of him. He turned to various vices in an attempt to fill that emptiness. Alcohol and drugs provided a temporary relief, but nothing could truly erase the overwhelming sense of loneliness and purposelessness that consumed him. He admitted that even women, something that many men in his position might turn to for validation, didn't ease his suffering. No matter what distractions he chased, the void only grew deeper. This struggle mirrors the concept of existential despair, where individuals facing an absence of meaning in their lives experience profound emptiness, sometimes leading them down destructive paths in search of purpose. Jerome's life took a turn when his sister Sissy needed him the most. Her husband, Alton, had become an alcoholic, leaving her to care for their young son Fraklin pretty much alone. Recognizing her struggle, Jerome saw an opportunity to do something meaningful, not just for her, but for himself. He encouraged Sissy to move closer to him, promising that he would be whatever she needed him to be. When she arrived, bringing Fraklin along, everything changed for Jerome.
Instantly, I had love, I had purpose. I was gonna be the man to raise you. For the longest time, I thought that by lifting you up, watching the young man that you was gonna become, that maybe be the greatest thing that ever happened in my life.
For the first time in a long time, he had love and purpose. He wasn't just a man wandering through life, drowning in regret and loneliness. He was an uncle, a father figure, a mentor. Raising Fraklin became his reason to push forward, his way of contributing to something greater than himself. This aligns with self-determination theory, which suggests that humans are driven by three core needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Fraklin gave Jerome a sense of relatedness, an emotional connection that anchored him in a way nothing else had. But while raising Fraklin gave him purpose, it also set him on a path he never anticipated. His role as a father figure was meant to guide Fraklin towards a better future, yet over time, it became entangled with the very world that would lead to both of their downfalls. As Fraklin grew older, Jerome's role in his life evolved from being just an uncle to a mentor who introduced him to the streets. Jerome had been deeply embedded in the culture of South Central LA, a man who commanded respect as an OG gangbanger. He spent his days pumping iron in the front lawn and living by the unspoken rules of the neighborhood.
What's up, nephew?
Yet, he initially wanted more for Fraklin than a life of crime. Jerome had built a reputation for himself through small-scale hustling, primarily selling marijuana. Though he was no stranger to the criminal underworld, he had also set clear boundaries. He understood the risks of deeper involvement and had no interest in pushing hard drugs. When Fraklin first approached him about selling cocaine, Jerome outright refused.
About 18 months ago, some niggas jacked this Mexican diesel truck full of cocaine.
A lot of people got tapped behind that situation.
And that's the first reason I don't with no yayo. Rule number 2, because it ain't no wins. Pigs, they ready to put you in the clink, and they will. And rule number 3, you gotta sell to white folk in places where you gon' stick out, target on your back.
The cocaine game, in his eyes, was too dangerous, too unpredictable. He warned Fraklin that stepping into that world meant painting a target on his back. But Fraklin was relentless. When he learned how to convert cocaine into crack, he brought the idea to Jerome again. This time, the potential was undeniable. The demand for crack was growing rapidly, and the financial opportunities were unlike anything Jerome had ever seen. Despite his initial reservations, he allowed himself to be pulled into the operation.
We be making 7 figures a month. We got a good life here, don't we?
For 7 figures a month, baby, this world'll be whatever the we want it. Yes. Yes.
At this stage, Jerome was still more of a protector than a leader. His involvement was motivated by a sense of obligation to guide Fraklin, to make sure he wasn't being reckless, and to ensure that he had someone experienced watching his back. But this shift also marked the beginning of his deeper descent. He was no longer just hustling on the side, he was now a key player in a game that would inevitably change his life forever. During this time, Jerome's relationship with Louis also played a significant role in his transformation. She had her own past, growing up in Louisiana before relocating to LA. She had been involved with Claudia Crane, a powerful and ruthless figure in the underground scene. Louis would eventually see the bigger picture. She introduced Fraklin to Claudia in the first place, allowing Fraklin to get the drugs moving, setting the stage for their empire to expand. With Louis by his side and Fraklin leading the operation, Jerome's world was shifting rapidly. The line between guidance and full-fledged criminality was beginning to blur, and as the business grew, so did the violence, the stakes, and the weight of the choices he would have to make. As Franklin's empire expanded, Jerome found himself growing deeper into the drug trade. The business had evolved beyond small-scale deals. Now they were operating at a level that drew significant attention from law enforcement and rival gangs. Jerome, once a man who saw himself as Franklin's protector, was now fully immersed in the high-stakes world of crack cocaine distribution. They earned a lot of money fast, and he used his earnings to open Jam and Jerome's.
Jam and Jerome, grand opening sale, and we got the price. Can't be beat. Car speak, home stereo speak, boombox speak. Whatever you need.
A car sound system / electronics store that doubled down as a front for their drug operation. On the surface, it was a symbol of his success, a legitimate business that provided him with a degree of respectability, and one that he was actually proud of. But beneath the facade, the store was yet another cog in the growing machine of Franklin's empire. The money flowed in, but so did the violence. The police, recognizing the explosion of crack-related crime in South Central LA, began cracking down with brute force. The raids became more frequent, with police brutality escalating as they sought to dismantle the drug networks. Jerome, who had once hoped to stay somewhat under the radar, was now in the crosshairs. His perception of law enforcement shifted dramatically as he experienced firsthand the corruption and aggression they brought to the community. The violence extended beyond law enforcement. When Louis was shot in an attempted hit, Jerome was forced to confront the brutal reality of the game they were in.
Shot Louis as bad as you do. Okay, I do. But we gotta be smart. God invented Uzi, so they gotta be smart.
He embraced the violence. The Jerome Saint, who once hesitated to enter the cocaine game, was now a man willing to use force to protect what was his. As his reputation grew, so did his willingness to resort to extreme measures. What began as a reluctant descent into crime had now fully consumed him. Jerome was no longer just a protector. He was a participant in the cycle of violence that defined the crack era in Los Angeles. Jerome Saint had always been a man of principle, even with the violent world of South Central LA's drug trade. But the moment he pulled the trigger on Dimehead, a member of the Crips, everything changed. It wasn't just an act of survival, it was a defining moment that stripped away the last remnants of the man he once was. Before this moment, Jerome had done his best to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. He understood the rules of the game, but had never crossed the line into murder himself. But in that warehouse, when bullets started flying, instincts took over. He gunned down Dimehead, watching the life drain from his eyes as the weight of the axe settled in.
You alright?
Think so. Shot with him. Watch him drop. Got him in the head.
At first, he tried to rationalize it. Dimehead was a threat, an enemy in a war that had no mercy. But the reality of taking a life lingered in his mind. The guilt, the shock, the realization that there was no turning back. It all started to manifest in his behavior. The Jerome that once pumped iron in his front yard, laughing with Fraklin, was slowly eroding. This marked the beginning of cognitive dissonance in Jerome's psyche. He'd always seen himself as someone who could keep a degree of separation from the horrors of the drug trade, but now he was an active participant in its bloodshed. His mind struggled to reconcile this new reality with the values he once held. As the time passed, the initial shock gave way to something more dangerous: anger. Jerome began displaying signs of increased aggression, a defense mechanism to bury the internal conflict within him. He became quicker to resort to violence, showing no hesitation in using force to get his way. One such instance was his brutal beating of a dealer who failed to follow orders, nearly beating the man to death in a fit of rage.
Trey won't know about that drop.
How about you get the drop when I say you get the mother drop? How about that then?
Y'all should try to be a little more respectful, because then maybe you can try to light y'all asses up.
Back the
Teach your man how to squabble. Get that trigger next time.
The shift wasn't just about survival anymore, it was personal. Killing Dime had altered Jerome's perception of power and control. No longer just Franklin's muscle, he was becoming a feared enforcer in his own right. His moral boundaries had been shattered, and the more he embraced violence, the less remorse he seemed to feel. The moment Jerome killed a woman named Khadija, another major turning point in his descent, it was clear that he had accepted his role in the cycle of bloodshed.
Why the I gotta turn the other cheek?
What's wrong? They didn't even have to do that.
Khadija had become a problem, a relentless force out for revenge after her daughter was killed. In eliminating her, Jerome justified it as necessary for survival, but at what cost? This was the dark psychology of Jerome Saint in full effect. The trauma of his first kill had numbed him. The internal struggle that once haunted him was fading, replaced by a hardened exterior that saw violence as a means to an end. But deep down, something inside him was still unsettled. The more he killed, the more detached he became from the man he once aspired to be. Jerome had once found purpose in raising Fraklin, believing he was protecting him. But now, the tables had turned. The business had swallowed him whole, transforming him from a protector to a predator. The psychological toll of his choices was evident, but by this stage, the only way to cope was to lean further into the darkness. As Jerome continued down the path of violence and criminality, his relationship with Fraklin began to strain under the pressure of the expanded drug empire. What once was a partnership built on loyalty and family began to crumble as Louis, his wife and closest confidant, exerted her influence over him.
We've been following you a long time, Fraklin. Now we want to run what's ours, our way.
Unlike Jerome, Louis had always been ambitious and strategic, seeing herself as more than just a player in Franklin's empire. She wanted control. Louis' growing resentment towards Fraklin planted the seeds of division between Jerome and his nephew. She convinced Jerome that Fraklin had outgrown his loyalty to them, that he was prioritizing his own power and money above family. Jerome, once the man who stood by Fraklin as a protector, found himself manipulated into seeing his nephew as a rival rather than an ally.
You're so sure that you're so much smarter than everybody else. Because I know breaking away wasn't Jerome's idea.
Don't talk out your goddamn neck, boy.
Well, then maybe you can enlighten me, Unc, on what the she wants.
The relationship reached a breaking point when Fraklin, now struggling to maintain his control of the operation, robbed Jerome and Louis to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his, breaking into their stash and stealing their bricks of cocaine. This betrayal solidified the divide between them. Jerome and Louis saw Franklin's actions as a declaration of war.
Nephew, if you don't bring back what you stole, you gonna understand how this work, Lil.
You want to come after me, that's fine. Came into this shit with my eyes open, and they still are.
When you said you didn't want to go to war with your family, I tried to respect it, but you need to know exactly who we dealing with.
And with tensions already at their peak, they responded accordingly. Jerome, now fully embracing his darker nature, did something he never would have imagined in the past. He brutally murdered Black Diamond, Franklin's trusted female bodyguard and associate.
You stole from me. I want it back. Now where is it?
We don't know.
It's gonna get bad for you in a hurry if you don't tell me what I want to know.
I swear, you didn't tell us.
Oh yeah?
Yes! Hey, stop hitting her! We don't stop hitting her!
Her skull was fractured, and the blunt trauma had caused extensive intracranial hemorrhaging. We tried to stop the bleeding and relieve the pressure, but I'm sorry.
With unrelenting brutality, he pistol whipped her repeatedly, each strike fueled by the rage and disillusionment that had been building within him. This moment was one of his darkest, marking the complete erosion of a man who once found purpose in protecting Fraklin. The psychology behind Jerome's transformation at this stage can be linked to moral disengagement, a psychological process where individuals rationalize or justify their harmful actions by detaching from their moral compass. At this point, Jerome no longer saw his actions as wrong. He believed he was doing what needed to be done. He was a soldier in a war where Fraklin had become an enemy. But deep down, a part of him still struggled with the reality of what he'd become. Unlike Louis, whose ambition had blinded her to the cost of their decisions. Jerome was beginning to feel the weight of it all. The empire they had built was now tearing their family apart, and as much as he tried to justify his actions, there was no denying that the love and purpose he once had were now slipping away. The war with Fraklin was not just about power, it was personal, and Jerome, caught in the middle, was forced to make choices that would ultimately define his fate. By the time Jerome realized how far he had fallen, it was already too late. The life he'd once imagined for himself, a life of purpose, of family, of providing protection rather than destruction, was now buried beneath the weight of bloodshed and betrayal. He had sided with Louis in her war against Fraklin, not necessarily out of ambition like her, but out of loyalty. Yet as the conflict escalated and the violence surrounding them intensified, Jerome began to question if this was truly the life he wanted. The growing rift between him and Fraklin heavily weighed on him. He had raised Fraklin like a son, and now they were enemies, caught in a brutal game that neither of them could escape from unscathed. The war had stripped away any illusion of familial love, leaving only power struggles, revenge, and self-preservation. And as Jerome looked around at the empire he had built, he saw not wealth and success, but carnage and regret. His doubts reached their peak when he confided in Louis that he no longer wanted to be in the game.
I ain't looking for no goddamn fight. I'm telling you, I'm goddamn done. I'm done selling crack. I'm done getting shot at. I'm done trying to kill my goddamn family.
Okay, fine. What the am I supposed to do with that?
Maybe you're supposed to acknowledge this shit is fucking insanity. The money ain't worth it, Lou. No matter how wrong this shit is, ain't nothing gonna make it right.
He expressed his exhaustion, his desire to leave it all behind and find something more meaningful. But Louis, consumed by her hunger for power, refused to listen. She saw the empire as their legacy, something worth fighting for at all costs. Jerome, however, was tired of fighting. He was tired of watching people die. He was tired of losing himself. But even as he tried to pull away, his loyalty to Louis kept dragging him back in.
I'm sorry that our life has become this.
Lou, I've done everything for you. Everything.
No, you have, Jerome. So when you're saying that you can't do that here, that you done, I hear you. But I just need more time. Because I made promises.
I'll do my drop. You go and get your mind right. Business.
When she was kidnapped by Kane Hamilton's crew, which was retaliation for Louis' hit on him, Jerome had no choice but to act. Despite his growing doubts about the drug trade, he couldn't abandon her. He teamed up with Fraklin, Leon, and Scully for one final mission, storming Kane's compound to rescue Louis. In the chaos of the shootout, Jerome came face to face with Kane himself. Kane had Louis in his grasp, using her as a shield, and for a brief moment, Jerome hesitated. He knew that this moment defined everything. The war, the choices, the sacrifices. He drew his weapon, knowing there was no way out. Jerome managed to kill Kane, but not before taking fatal shots himself. As he fell to the ground bleeding out, you could see the devastation in Louis' eyes. She had wanted the power, but in the process, she had lost the one person who always truly stood by her side. As Jerome lay dying, the weight of his choices settled on him. The money, the empire, the violence, it had all led to this. The man who had once found purpose in raising Fraklin, in being a protector, had been consumed by the very game he tried to control. His death was inevitable, not just because of the world he was in, but because deep down, a part of him had already died a long time ago. Jerome Saint's story is a tragedy of transformation. He began as a man who sought belonging, purpose, and love, a protector to his family, especially Fraklin, who he raised as if he were his own son. But the world he stepped into didn't allow for protection without corruption. Every choice he made, every compromise, pushed him further into the violent cycle that would eventually consume him. At his core, Jerome was not a ruthless criminal like the others in the game. His actions were driven by obligation rather than greed. But over time, the pressure to survive turned him into the very thing he once feared becoming. His psychological descent can be analysed through multiple frameworks, each revealing the layers of internal conflict that define his arc. One of the key concepts that applies to Jerome's downfall is cognitive dissonance. Early on, he tried to maintain a separation between his moral beliefs and the drug trade. He justified his actions as necessary to protect his loved ones, but each violent act chipped away at his sense of self. The dissonance between his former values and his current reality forced him to suppress his guilt, leading to increased aggression and emotional detachment. His fate was also influenced by a role engulfment, a psychological phenomenon in which an individual becomes so deeply embedded in a role that it consumes their whole identity. Jerome never truly wanted to be a kingpin or a killer, but he was dragged deeper into the game, first by Fraklin, then by Louis. He had no choice but to embrace the role others expected him to play. The longer he stayed in the game, the more it defined him. His relationship with Louis further highlights the dangers of codependency in high-stress environments. While she saw the drug empire as an opportunity for power and control, Jerome wanted something simpler. Yet, his love for her kept him tied to a life he no longer wanted. Even when he tried to leave, she pulled him back in, feeding his sense of duty and responsibility. In the end, this attachment cost him his life. The final stage of Jerome's psychological arc is learned helplessness. As the war with Fraklin intensified and the violence escalated, Jerome lost any hope of escape. He no longer believed that he had a way out, so he stopped fighting against the tide. His decision to charge into Kane Hamilton's compound was not just an attempt to save Louis, it was an acceptance of his fate. His death was tragic, but in many ways, it was also an act of surrender. Jerome Saint's life was marked by a cruel irony. The very qualities that made him a protector, his loyalty, his love, his aggression, his sense of duty, were the same qualities that led to his downfall. He was a man who wanted to shield his family from the dangers of the world, yet he became a victim of those same dangers. In the end, Jerome was not a villain, nor was he a hero. He was a man who tried to navigate an impossible situation, and like so many before him, he was consumed by the very forces he once sought to control.